Today, we're going to talk about a common phenomenon that I like to call just get grants syndrome. It's this common idea that we can just get grants to fix, fill in the blank with whatever struggle, money woes, or new venture that you're considering. I'm here to give you some tough love and a dose of reality today and tell you that just get grants syndrome doesn't work. But I'm not going to leave you high and dry there on my soapbox. We're going to discuss a much better approach that you can take instead. Whether you're a freelance grant writer or a nonprofit, you need to hear this, so stick around. Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Hey friends, before we dig in today, I'd like to share with you a tool that I've found really useful. Nonprofits and grant writers often ask me where to find grants and how to keep up with all the different deadlines, especially when you're juggling a lot of projects and even for multiple clients. Recently, I discovered Instrumental, and it's made my grant searching and tracking process go so much faster. They have so many cool features and searches and lots of funder data right there in the system. That would take hours to dig up on my own. Instrumental really does bring all your grant prospecting, tracking, and the ongoing management under one roof. I like it so much that I partnered with Instrumental to give you a free 2-week trial and $50 off your first month. Go to teresahuff.com/instrumental and use the code GWSPOD. That's instrument with an L at the end. Their customers increase the rate of grant applications they submit by 78%. Imagine what that could do for your nonprofit's funding. Go give it a try and let me know how you like it. All right, today we're going to talk about just get grants syndrome. I know you're working so hard trying to gain traction, whether you're working in your nonprofit or you're trying to build your freelance grant writing business. And you're doing it because ultimately you want to make a big impact in your community. And rightly so. That's why we're all doing this, right? But some days you wonder if you'll ever gain momentum. That can be exhausting and frustrating. And if you hear one more person say, "Why don't you just get grants?" Like it's just that easy. You might just rip their head off. That's the misconception that we're going to talk about today. It discredits the hard work and skill that grant writers pour into their work. And it makes hardworking nonprofit leaders feel like they're never quite doing enough, like they're missing something, and it should be so much easier. But let me tell you, it is time for just get grants syndrome to stop. If you're hanging out with me today, it's probably because you've reached a point in your nonprofit or your freelance grant writing career where you don't know what you don't know. You've come as far as you can on your own. Yet you probably feel this pressure to get grant funding, and the fear of missing out is kicking in hard. We're going to talk through some of those unspoken expectations so you can shake off that feeling of never quite doing enough, and instead we can focus on the actions that you can take to move your nonprofit work forward. After nearly 20 years of writing grants and winning several $1 million in funding for schools and nonprofits, I realized that grant writing is so much more effective when you take the time to step back and build out your bigger picture strategy first. This shotgun idea of just getting grants is not a good strategy. Often I hear nonprofits say they think we need to just get grants. Others seem to be getting grant funding, so why can't we? What are we doing wrong? And if you're believing this, I imagine you're feeling exhausted and frustrated. You're working so hard, but you feel like you're missing something. Your goal is to move your nonprofit mission forward so you can make a bigger impact, right? Grants are a long game. and they come much later in the process. They are not one of the first things. Remember, I've said in past episodes, grant funders don't want to be your first dollar or your only dollar. So in order to get the impact you want, focusing on grants right now could actually be keeping you stuck if you haven't done the important work of looking at your nonprofit or your grant writing career goals first and figuring out your strategy and building those foundational pieces to move into grants. So this is what we work on in my programs. We figure out what you need to be focusing on based on 3 things. Number 1, where you are in your journey. Number 2, the resources you have to work with already. And number 3, what's the most effective path forward for you based on your vision or your nonprofit's vision. That is what's going to help you move forward. You don't need to be submitting mediocre grant applications left and right. You need to work with your board and your leadership team to create a strategy for your nonprofit's future. And then you can map out a clear action plan to get there. And if you're a freelance grant writer, the process is the same. You need to work on your strategy so that you have a clear path forward. You might be like my client. They're a small nonprofit who hit a plateau after several years. The board and the director knew they needed to make some shifts in order to grow to the next level. They were all in agreement on that. They just didn't know how to move forward. The board was supportive of the mission and they wanted to help, but they didn't fully understand their leadership role. That held them back from getting involved, which left the director feeling alone. The executive director told me, "We just feel stuck." Unfortunately, that was leading to frustration and burnout, even though they all still deeply believed in their mission and they wanted to make a difference through their work. But that's exhausting. We started to dig into their mission and their work, and together we mapped out their goals, and then we developed a clear action plan to work toward those goals. And now, several months later, they've made huge strides in their nonprofit work, and even more, they're operating as a team. It's been such a cool transformation to watch. And it's been the same in the Fast Track to Grant Writer program. Students come to me knowing they have a heart and skill for grant writing, but they're stuck. They don't know how to move forward. And we go through that same process. We dig deep into their why, identify their goals, and then we develop a clear plan for them to build their freelance grant writing business. One in particular was a college student with a part-time income, so it was an investment he took seriously. And because of that, he poured himself into the homework, he showed up to the meetings, and he gave it 100%. And it completely paid off. He was able to dial in so clearly on his skills and what kind of work he was looking for that I was able to keep an eye out, and I could recommend him when I saw an opening that looked like a perfect fit. He landed that client, and he's now working his ideal amount of hours on freelancing with a client that he's really enjoying. Now, you may be thinking, yeah, that's great for them, but would it work for us? Or would it work for me? Look, whether you're a nonprofit or a freelancer, I know that every dollar is hard won. I get it. And right now, you're probably wondering if strategy is really worth the investment. And in your nonprofit, you might even have a board member asking, why would we spend money on strategy if we can just do it ourselves? Here's the thing. You can try it on your own if you want. Nobody's going to stop you. However, nobody's going to help you that way either. The advantage of working with an outside expert is that sometimes you need that new perspective. It's like a mirror. Think about it. Technically, you could get ready for work in the morning without a mirror. You could brush your teeth and comb your hair and get dressed. You can even glance down and make sure your clothes aren't too wrinkled. But you can't really know what you look like without the help of a mirror. You can't see the food that's stuck in your teeth or that thread hanging off the back of your jacket. And for my girlfriends out there, you might struggle just a bit with putting on your makeup if you didn't have a mirror. You really need that mirror to get the polished look so you can feel confident leaving the house. That's what good strategy does for you. Sometimes you need the help of a mirror to reflect the full picture of what you look like and help you put those finishing touches on. That last 20% of polishing can make all the difference in your presentation. The mirror helps you put your best foot forward and know that your efforts are reflecting the work that you're putting in. And that's why I work so hard on my programs to help grant writers and nonprofits to be that mirror for you so that you can maximize your impact and make the most out of your situation. My nonprofit client that I mentioned earlier was in that same situation. Investing in strategic planning was a big decision for them and not an expense they took lightly. And frankly, I'm glad that they took it seriously because they were vested in the process and they knew they needed to put in the work to get the outcome. Two big factors came into play for them. Number one, they understood the value of investing in the long-term health of their nonprofit. And number two, they knew they couldn't move forward any further on their own. They knew deep down that they were at a point where they either had to invest in growth or they would eventually fizzle out. They knew they needed to take this risk in order to move forward. But here's the thing I want you to hear. After it was all said and done, they realized it wasn't a risk at all. Instead, it was a game changer. After going through the strategic planning process together, they gained more momentum in 2 months than they had in the last 2 years. It was a game changer, not a risk. Up to this point, you've been believing that you're not doing enough, that you're not applying for enough grants, that you're not trying hard enough, that you haven't read enough books or written enough practice grant applications. That's exactly how the best nonprofit leaders and grant writers end up burned out and disillusioned with the work. I want to challenge you today to step away from that way of thinking, because once you do, you'll be able to start gaining clarity and traction again in your work. That's how you bring in more funding, and that's how you maximize your impact. Now, if this is resonating with you, this is exactly what I help my clients with every day. I want you to be a good steward of your money, and I want to help you create a solid future to carry out your nonprofit's vision. Let's move beyond just get grant syndrome, and let's help you have a smart, strategic approach to your nonprofit work or your freelance grant writing career. If you know you're ready to take your nonprofit or your grant writing to the next level in a way that helps you carry out your mission without burning out, I want to invite you to work with me. Nonprofits can go to teresahuff.com/apply, where you can fill out my application form and see if we're a good fit to work together. Let's start the conversation. Grant writers can sign up at teresahuff.com/VIP and start on the fast track to grant writer right away. Remember to check out today's sponsor, Instrumental, to get your free trial and use the code GWSPOD at teresahuff.com/instrumental for $50 off your first month. If you're still with me now, I know your wheels are turning. I want you to go do a brain dump of all those ideas, those questions, the frustrations, the problems, places you're stuck, whatever it is. Get it all down on paper. Messy, just dump it all out. That will help you get started with those 3 steps that we talked about before, where number 1, you've got to figure out where are you in your journey. Number 2, what resources do you have to work with? And number 3, what's the most effective path for you based on your vision? All right, friends, I love hearing from you, so reach out anytime. Let me know. Have you ever faced just get grant syndrome, and how do you handle it? Connect on LinkedIn, and let's continue the conversation over there. All right, have a great week. Now go change your world.